use the water emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and,
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 1007.IS4602, certificate number 37139. Pulgasari.
This show is part of a new policy I am trying to implement, which is that I'm going to do shows that you know more about than I do, and then it basically becomes a you show because I'll just ask you questions and then you have to
You'll just
talk.
be offloading the work.
Yeah.
Well, I think my next show is actually going to involve puddle jumper planes in Alaska.
Oh, boy.
And I'm not even kidding.
Oh, boy.
I can just sit back. I'm going to put my arms behind my head in a humorous Chewbacca-like way and let you go.
Well, I've got a lot of questions in today's episode. First of all, about how to pronounce Korean names.
See, this I can do. Korean's totally phonetic. It's easy.
But also, I want to know about your experiences growing up in Korea, and I think they will bear on the overall kind of shape of our show.
If not, we should have a hand signal, like wrap it up.
Where you're like, don't know any about it, get on with
What
it.
will you do when there's too much Korea? What will you do with your hands?
Oh, too much Korea?
Yeah, like...
I don't think you can have too much Korea.
I mean, in pop music? In soap operas? In cosmetics?
I think they're burgeoning
not.
car industry.
Yeah. Is it burgeoning?
No, I mean, I think it's burgeoned.
It's done burgeoned.
I think it's full on a mature car industry now.
My family drove a Hyundai in the early 80s before America had them.
We hadn't even heard of Hyundai.
I think we had like some model that never came here, like a Presto or an Excel or something like that.
Was it a good car?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They know what they're doing over there.
Sure.
They know boy bands. Yep. They know soap operas. The food, the fried chicken is amazing. Like they took fried chicken, which we thought we had perfected.
Yeah. We invented.
I mean, I'm not from the South, but when I say we, I speak with pride of all the Southern peoples who gave us fried chicken.
Mm-hmm. America.
And then they were like, no, you're doing it wrong.
Really?
You should have red pepper paste and you should fry it twice.
It's true. I do like that food a lot.
Pretty good.
You know, I'm a chicken strip man myself.
That's all you eat?
I like a chicken strip.
You're like a 4-year-old. You eat the one shaped like dinosaurs?
No, I don't eat chicken strips that are made out of ground chicken.
Right.
I eat
the high quality stuff.
Yeah, the good stuff. I mean,
so good.
My daughter and I basically have been around the town looking for the best chicken strips. And honestly, best chicken strips used to be at the Montlake Market, which they tore down to build a parking lot.
I know. So they could stage a freeway and light rail expansion that still hasn't opened.
It's just still sitting there. Did you ever eat the chicken strips at the Montlake Market?
Are they Korean style?
Oh, no, but they were so good. This isn't relevant, but I'm just like waxing
I'm
nostalgic.
gonna keep moving it away from the actual topic of Pulgasari. Have you been to Sisters and Brothers, this Nashville hot chicken place?
No.
Used to be in Georgetown. Now it's in Inner Bay. It's a weird windowless lounge lined with mirrors and cool old kitschy stuff. I think there's a Ms. Pac-Man machine in a table, the kind you look down on.
Sure.
Everything's fried there, and everything's really good.
Inner Bay's super convenient for me to get to.
It's not that bad, right?
I just take the light rail, the monorail to get there.
No. Just take 99.
Yeah. I'm on that. I'm on 99, not as often as you, but
I live on 99.
I go along it.
This place is legit to the degree that I ordered Seattle hot, and they were like, "Are you sure?"
Oh,
Like that, even Seattle hot, they said was
too hot for gringos?
Maybe I just looked. Well, I said, "What's the one below it? Baby hot," and they're like, "Baby hot's like Tabasco sauce."
Oh,
and
you
I
want more than
said,
that.
"Well, to me, Tabasco sauce is not baby hot. Like I don't come from a culture that gives babies Tabasco sauce. There's nothing wrong if you do. I mean, you'll have heartier babies than I will."
Right.
We got one of each, and baby hot was actually
Pretty hot.
kind of hot.
Yeah. Oh, what is the Korean word for like gaijin, for haoles?
Oh, I mean, Americans are miguk sarams, but that's not just white person.
It's migusaram. It's specifically
that's
American.
That's like a nationality.
They don't just have a generic term for non-Korean.
Apparently Begin, but I don't know that.
Oh, you weren't. That wasn't shouted at you as you walked to and from school.
It probably was, and I would have been so sad if I'd known it. Now, I thought they were just telling me to begin.
Yeah, begin.
Begin what? Oh, it's a racial slur. Never mind.
So, what year did you move to Korea?
82.
1982. So
Wait, is that right? Late 81, actually. Fall 81.
At the time, South Korea was still under a military dictatorship.
It was. And I don't think I realized this until like maybe 25 years later. Like I was in my 40s and I was like, oh, wait. Like Park Chung-hee had just been assassinated when we moved there. Like because there still was an election cycle, but it just wasn't actually free or fair. And I remember the first time the posters actually came up for opposition parties. It was a big deal.
But Park Chung-hee was also an autocrat, like a dictator.
Yes, no, he was the assassinated dictator who had been replaced by the head of his CIA who had maybe helped with the assassination plot. Who could say?
Sure.
Chun Doo-hwan was the president at the time. And he was just like a nice bald Asian man. And we were just like, oh yeah, he's the president like Reagan. And it turned out he kind of was. But there were some key differences. I mean, he knew what day it was, for one thing.
We think of South Korea now as being like a paragon of democracy and a free, open place where everybody's doing the like crazy dances in parking garages. And
Happened while I was there.
Is that right?
Although they did declare martial law like 3 months ago. You remember this?
Yeah.
Yes, that was weird. It only lasted for like 45 minutes. And I'm sure America is very close to a similar episode, so I'm not gonna like
Cast aspersions.
exactly.
Is the South Korean parliament the one where people get in fist fights all the time?
It's usually Taiwan.
It's Taiwan, yeah.
So there were it was kind of big news. Suddenly we were, you'd go around Seoul, and in addition to Chun Doo-hwan or his handpicked successor, No Tae-woo, you'd actually see posters for two other guys named Kim. And of course, this seemed normal to us who had, just been through a couple American elections, but no, this was news that two opposition parties could run. And both those guys, I think, later served as president, and one has a Nobel Peace Prize now.
How did that transition happen between a military dictatorship and democracy? Like, who was the George Washington of Democratic Korea who either stepped down or ceded power, or what happened?
I think Chun's handpicked successor, another military guy. We didn't know these guys were military or Korean CIA. They were just like nice guys in suits with glasses,
right?
But they didn't look like they didn't wear the uniforms of a South American junta, so it looked like a Western democracy. But Chun's successor, No Tae-woo, actually won an election or two, even though he was of the ruling party.
Oh, yeah.
He won the first democratic election.
Oh, people actually voted for him. It wasn't a fake election.
Right.
Oh, okay.
And I think there had been, student movements were on the rise. They had cracked down at those university protests in Gwangju in the late 70s. And then that had spread to Seoul campuses. So the whole time I was there was a period of campus unrest against the dictatorship and against American military bases. So, I was part of the problem.
And then you were living either near a base or you went to school on a base?
We were near the base. I guess we were civilian, but we were near the base. And that wasn't a distinction that the students cared about.
Right.
As we rode our red, white, and blue school buses through all this tear gas, we're just like, hi, sorry.
So there were big pro-democracy protests that led to the actual democratic elections.
Right.
I don't think there was one person who said, "I will lay down my power," although Noah's a pretty pivotal figure, but I think I think all those guys got in trouble later for being in power during some of the crackdowns. So,
they were tried, or they were.
Let me look.
Thrown down a hole? No, probably not thrown down a hole. That's not what we do.
Both were given hefty sentences. Both Chun and Noah were given hefty sentences and then pardoned the following year. The two Kims who had been kind of the opposition leaders in the wilderness, and then presidential candidates running against the ruling party, Kim Il-sung and Kim Dae-jung, later became Korean president because there were term limits. So they both served in the 90s.
This is a great podcast so far, and it's only going to get more interesting.
I hope it gets more interesting than this. This is really putting I'm going to let Ken talk about Korea policy to the test.
What was your experience of North Korea, living in South Korea in the early 80s? How much conversation about North Korea was there? How much talk about Kim Il-sung was there, and what role did North Korea play in South Korea?
It was still Kim Il-sung, the founding father of North Korea,
right, all the way into the 90s.
Yep. The funny thing is that was ever present for us during the Cold War. This looming evil military dictatorship to the north, and yet I don't recall anybody in my family, at my school, at my social circle ever saying, "Well, it's also a military dictatorship here in the South." Like nobody mentioned the problematic current government, and not just because they're listening. I think just because at the height of the Cold War, of course you want a good, crazy right-wing government in charge near your domino theory borders, right?
Right.
Seoul is close enough to the DMZ that it was a childhood of. I mean, when I first moved there was a nightly curfew. You couldn't be on the streets after midnight. And once a month, there was an air raid drill where everybody had to come in off the streets. So countrywide, I think it was a nationwide drill. Maybe it was just Seoul and environs.
Because they could hit Seoul with basically mortars, right? Or missiles?
It's like, I don't know, 40 miles from the border or something. Right. Like a fighter jet could get there in minutes. And we would hear the occasional sonic boom, and they tended to come in pairs. And what we heard was that this was typically one plane breaking the other country's airspace, and then a retaliatory move. Oh, so you would hear both sides of the little Top Gun era duel in the sky.
I hardly ever hear you talk about this story of your childhood trauma as a way of explaining why you're late or why you're disagreeable. You should use this more.
Of course I forgot my appointment. I grew up close to the DMZ. No, we were little Empire of the Sun kids. We thought it was funny.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, we were just running around haha, this is the air raid siren. We're supposed to go inside, but maybe we could just duck into the store and buy gum, It was an inconvenience more than a source of geopolitical fear.
Well, I wanted to, get your sense, really paint a picture of South Korea in the 80s, and I think you've done it. I think it's you've made a vivid picture.
It didn't look that different from how it did at the end of the war. We just talked about skyscrapers recently on Omnibus. There were maybe 4 reinforced steel skyscraper projects in Seoul when we got there. They just were not big office buildings yet.
Right. Right. And now Seoul is a megalopolis.
Yeah. You cannot believe the difference.
Well, today's story is about North Korea.
I've only been there once.
And what were you doing in North Korea?
If you tour the DMZ, they let you walk around the table.
Oh, they do?
Yeah.
So you cross over and you cross back.
Yeah. You don't get a stamp in your passport.
Right.
But if you want to say, I've been in North Korea, I think technically half that room is on their side of the DMZ. So if the tour guide takes you around the table, hey, this is where the Panmunjom peace talks happened, you're in North Korea for 30 seconds.
Yeah, it's like my trip to Algeria. I crossed over, they sat me down at a table, and basically the conclusion they came to was no thanks. Go back to Rabat and get more stuff. And I got to Rabat and I was like, meh.
I think when I keep track of my personal list of countries, I do not count North Korea because I think it's kind of a cheat.
It seems like going to the Atlanta airport. It doesn't count as
I would
visiting.
never count
Georgia.
an airport lounge.
No.
But for some reason, maybe because there's no other easy way to see any of North Korea, I think some people do count walking around the table.
I mean, maybe walk around the table just as a gag. I feel like.
I thought it would be fun to leave gum under the table.
Lol.
Little prank. That'll get him for all the human rights abuses.
Well, I'm not going to tell the whole story of North Korea because, as we know, all Omnibus listeners are highly educated people, and they already know.
They're from a different time.
Yeah, they already know the whole story.
Well, even if they know a bunch about repressive authoritarian governments, North Korea is a very weird one because it's hyper-isolated even by the standards of hyper-isolation.
Yeah, and the Japanese occupation of Korea during World War II created kind of after the end of the war, when the Japanese withdrew, there was already a kind of division in Korea that was a holdover from Japan, and it was easy to transfer the kind of enemy Japanese over to an enemy South Korea that was basically an American proxy. I mean, very easy.
Another foreign imperial puppet.
Right.
Yeah.
But as we said, the founding father of North Korea was Kim Il-sung, and his successor, his son Kim Jong-il, someone that we remember pretty vividly because he was the sunglass wearing, like high-heeled boot, pantsuit sort of character that led North Korea through, I think, probably most of my formative years. Not formative years, but through the 90s when you were really paying attention to that kind of geopolitical.
Especially with the collapse of the Soviet Union, what's going to happen to these satellite states?
Yeah, in the 80s, we were so focused on the USSR.
And skateboards.
And skateboarding, and, like my dad had a killer set of tools. But after the Soviet Union collapsed, then it became really like, who are the nut jobs? And then especially after the U.S. normalized relations with Vietnam, the number of Asian dictators
that you could put in movies.
Right? But
it did seem like the dominoes were going to keep falling, and North Korea would eventually. Nope. They're happy there in their mountains.
And we thought for a long time that Chinese communism was going to be replaced by Chinese capitalism. We didn't realize that they could have both. Why not both? As the little girl says.
Yeah, it sure seemed to be trending not the way it went.
Right. But the funny thing about Kim Jong-il is that, kind of like Prince Charles, I think he was the heir apparent for many, many years. And
how old was Kim Il-sung when he died?
No one expected Kim Il-sung to continue to be in power, like literally 50 years after the war.
Age 82.
82.
And these people are mythical people. In North Korea, there are legends told about how, they're born on some quasi-mythological mountain, like they're basically gods among men.
Gods among men. And one of the things that sort of, one of Kim Il-sung's, one of the things that elevated him to the level of a, not demigod exactly, but they were very good at sort of taking credit for everything. Like, they were the architects of all the buildings. They were the best generals in the military. Kind of the typical autocrat behavior.
In the same way that a religious person is taught to see the hand of God in everything that happens, right. North Koreans are taught to see the hand of Kim Il-sung and his family. And
Kim Il-sung developed a North Korean ideology called Juche.
Yeah.
Which literally translates as self-reliance, but it was, kind of initially just Marxism or just sort of Leninism. And then over time, he customized it to fit the North Korean mentality and their idea of being an isolated island of like true workers' paradise being confronted on all sides by imperialism.
We don't need other nations. In fact, they're actively evil threats.
Right. And Juche is in South Korea, I guess, against the law, or if North Korean propaganda or
it's kind of against the law here. You can't start
that's right.
You can't start a self-reliant Marxist state here in Burien, Washington, for example.
Not a Marxist state, but you certainly could have a Marxist book club.
You could have a flag.
You could. I mean, the
club, yes.
the flag, the Cascadia flag with that dumb Doug fir tree, that feels a little bit like you're just making up stuff now.
You could self-publish a Marxist cookbook.
You could.
Nobody could stop you.
We're going to talk about some self-publishing.
Yeah.
The thing about Juche is that it became like the dominant ideology of North Korea. It gradually morphed into a political philosophy that essentially is their communist philosophy, and it's
a way of life.
It's a way of life. It elevated Kim Il Sung to the godhead, but it also dominated the cultural life. And North Korea has been described as essentially a theater state, which is to say that theater, film, music, the arts are really elevated there primarily as a vehicle for communicating Juche. They have staged epic operas. There's been a film culture there since the 60s, since the 50s. They really use their propaganda machine. We see a lot of pictures of North Korean streets with big banners, and we understand it to be extremely authoritarian, but there's also this really dynamic arts scene, but all of it generally is prescribed to follow or promote Juche.
Yeah, probably pretty top-down organized. I mean, propaganda campaigns are always a kind of theater, right? Like North Korea has these Potemkin villages facing the south, which are pretty much film sets with, loudspeakers sending messages. It's a fictional town that we're supposed to admire their industry and success.
Right.
And the same thing in Pyongyang with that, that giant hotel they never finished, that I think now has propaganda LEDs all over it. It's like the government there is kind of a theatrical production.
Yeah, and I think that's probably true. I mean, it's certainly true of our current president, who is effectively a TV star and running the country in a sort of like TV version of the United States, or a TV version of a presidency. But one of the things, one of the ways, so we have Kim Jong-il, who was born in 1941. By the time if you think about his father was born in 1912. So by 1942, as he's about to ascend to the leadership of North Korea, he's 32 years old. Well, Kim Jong-il, at 32 years old, is not even halfway through his father's reign, and a kind of, he's looking for something to do, and he's extremely interested in film, dedicated to his film fandom.
This is kind of like Prince Charles.
Yeah, that's right.
He liked to go to parties and see, Barbra Streisand.
Ken, you know me. I often show up here with a broken arm or a missing finger or a missing tooth, a bullet wound, and I don't like to go to the doctor. Let's be honest. Who does? But part of the problem is, because of my unique combination of bipolar disorder, alcoholism, and attention deficit disorder, it's so hard to find a doctor. And the last thing you should do is go online and Google your symptoms. Boy, talk about an anxiety attack. When you're having an anxiety attack, go Google anxiety attack. Ugh, it's the worst. I don't recommend it. The problem is I have no interest in finding a doctor. And it's so difficult, it's so overwhelming that I just would rather go without medical care entirely. And that's why this finger doesn't go all the way straight. By the time I finally saw a doctor, he said, well, it's too late to do anything now. What kind of treatment were you applying? And I said, well, I duct taped it between two chopsticks. And he was like, good work, doctor. Anyway, rather than Google your symptoms and then do nothing, let me tell you about ZocDoc. Now, ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors and click to instantly book an appointment. Now, this is another problem. The in-network, I get healthcare through my daughter's mother/partner, and her company pays for maybe the worst insurance. I mean, everywhere I go, the receptionists just laugh at me when I say what my insurance is, and I get shooed out of a lot of doctors' offices because they don't take my insurance. But ZocDoc can help you compare in-network doctors and instantly book an appointment. And I'm talking about booking with more than 100,000 doctors across every specialty. Now, I'm not saying you should book 100,000 appointments. I'm saying from mental health to dental health, primary care to urgent care, and more, 100,000 different doctors accessible to you through ZocDoc. And you can filter, obviously, for who takes your insurance, but also who's located nearby or who's a good fit for almost any medical need you may have. And then once you find the right doctor, you can see their actual appointment openings, not their mythological ones, and choose a time slot that works for you, and then click to instantly book a visit. So this is a perfect example of what the internet is good for. This is, in my opinion, a killer app. Stop putting off those doctor's appointments. Do not use me as a role model here, and go to ZocDoc.com/omnibus to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's Zoc, Z-O-C, doc, DOC.com/omnibus. ZocDoc.com/omnibus.
Kim Jong-il was obsessed with James Bond movies.
Interesting.
He really loved, later on in life, he loved the Friday the 13th series of movies. By the 80s, he was reputed to have between 15,000 and 30,000 titles in his movie collection. I think the difference between 15,000 and 30,000 is that the additional 15,000 were all pornos, and so he didn't claim them as part of his collection, but a separate barn.
I mean, I don't know if you can get to 30,000 movies without dipping into porn, right?
I think fully half of his collection was porn, but 15,000 films across all genres that he had translated into Korean, and he would often watch movies all day.
This is just yet another sign that the ruling class there absolutely, knew, they're not true believers, right? Like if he watches 15,000 movies about the West, he's not like, oh, these terrible foreigners, like he knows what their lives are like.
He's fully into it.
He knows what his family has done to his own country, and, it's all a big sham. I'm so let down.
It is, and he was really mad when North Korea was presented in a bad light in American army movies.
Like if he's into James Bond movies, like how early is there a North Korean villain? There's got to be.
I mean, isn't the first
GoldenEye?
There
one
was
of those Pierce Brosnan ones.
Pierce Brosnan, right, was the first where North Korea was the baddie.
I can't remember.
And I think he's on record as really hating that one, having loved every James Bond movie prior.
That must have been so rough.
But he was, as he got into his late 20s, early 30s, he was appointed kind of minister of propaganda, and turned this love of film into a whole big project to make the North Korean film industry into not just like a way of promoting juche, but also he really wanted it to be internationally known. Now, as you probably know, throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the South Korean film industry was like a huge industry there, a major part of South Korean culture.
Domestically, yeah.
And South Korean culture didn't start to influence the Western world until pretty recently, last 20 years.
Yeah, I think in the 90s there were a few examples I can think of where, a savvy film person from the West might know a Korean film or two.
Right.
Kim Ki-duk won some film festival awards. But yeah, it was a domestic Bollywood type.
Yeah, exactly. But there were huge film stars. There were dozens of movies a year.
Right.
And Kim Jong-il really admired the South Korean film industry and saw it as an opportunity to not just internally promote juche in film, but also, eventually North Korean films would be in film festivals and it would sort of legitimize North Korean civic life globally. And this was in an era before the terrible famines that followed that make us all feel like North Korea is basically on the verge of starvation at all times.
Uh-huh.
And so it was still plausible that North Korea was at least a competitor state with South Korea in terms of which was providing a better life to their citizens. I don't think anybody that really knew inside North Korea even a little.
It's not a close call.
Right, but as you say, South Korea was a military dictatorship too, and it sort of felt like things in the balance.
Does his idea to propagate juche at film festivals, does that kind of run up against his family's isolationist tendencies, though? Was he the only one thinking this?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was his kind of secret
his pet
love.
thing.
What he initially did was, because there was already a very vibrant North Korean opera culture. And a lot of these operas were credited to Kim Il-sung.
Right. That guy's so prolific.
A really famous one in 1971, an opera called Sea of Blood, which dramatized the Japanese occupation of Korea. This was like I guess, in a country where people are more or less starved for entertainment, and I'm not sure to what degree forced to attend.
There's no competition.
But Sea of Blood was a huge hit as an opera, and Kim Jong-il saw the opportunity to make it into a film, and so that began the sort of early 70s major push with Kim Jong-il at the fore to make Korean film. He was not yet expressing a film festival hope. He was really pouring this energy into making films that
Speak to his people.
espoused juche.
And
And
he's a Marxist dictator, but what he really wants to do is direct.
That's right. And in fact, he did get, unlike his father who was credited with these operas, he did get very involved in the actual making of the film, directing, actually even doing costume design. Like, he was fully invested in making films.
Real multi-hyphenate.
He was. There were five. There were so many operas, but the the five great operas, The Flower Girl. You can from the titles, you can kind of picture like the juche influence. The Flower Girl, Tell, O the Forest.
Tell, O the Forest?
Tell, O the Forest.
Oh, I see. Mm-hmm. Where the forest should tell us things.
We are telling of the forest.
Oh, okay.
A True Daughter of the Party. A lot of feminist titles.
Finally. Thank you.
Yeah. And in addition to Sea of Blood, The Song of Mount Kumgang.
No sequels. That's good. He's overflowing with ideas. No, there's no Song of Mount Kumgang Part 2. He's going to do new stuff.
Yeah, right. He's making a name for himself. In 1973, he actually wrote a book called On the Art of Cinema, where he actually made a kind of valid case for Juche cinema as a way, but like making film out of the seed, as he described it, of ideology.
You seem kind of convinced.
I mean, I love his movie. I just watch them all.
Are you going to stop watching Western movies because there's not enough Juche in them?
Most of them not available in the West, although there are some now that are
like terrible YouTube ribs.
renderings. Yeah, and this was a closed society, so most of these films not even the West had no knowledge of them.
Yeah, especially if they're not telecast, right? If you have to go see them in a North Korean theater.
Right. And this was obviously a time when North Korea was also trying to cut it with other Eastern Bloc countries. There was obviously like a schism.
Oh, yeah. We did that show about how when Tito's Yugoslavia got really into Mexican film.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And so Soviet, Czech, Hungarian, I mean, all those countries had film industries, and they were all various sort of propaganda operas, socialist realism. And so there was a little bit of North Korean cinema that was viewable in Europe, but only on the other side of the wall.
Yeah.
Now, our story kind of goes back now a little bit to the early 60s and a period when it was, a decade after the Korean War, but it was a very tense time in the DMZ. And over the course of 3 years, from 62 to 65, 4 different American soldiers, all of them kind of from broken homes, young, orphans, anti-authoritarian bent, 4 different soldiers, all of whom kind of were in trouble, almost ready to be dishonorably discharged or censured or busted down, or they were kind of in the streets of Seoul going to hookers and not.
They're far from home. The military is not working out for them.
Right. 4 different young soldiers jumped the line and ran through the DMZ kind of with a I don't care if I live or die mentality. And
you think it was suicide by cop, or were they like anything's going to be better than?
I think at the time the because North Korea was a closed system and really sort of promulgating the idea that they were a socialist paradise, there was a sense that, either I go to jail here, like an army jail here for violating, for forging a pass, or I hop the fence and go live in a socialist paradise. I mean, there were instances of people from the West not just becoming spies, but actually just defecting to the Soviet Union. Oswald.
Seems a little more plausible in East Germany than North Korea. I mean, I guess they do. I wonder if the propaganda machine at the border, I wonder if it reached some of these people, Because I'm sure they're broadcasting in English the glories of North Korea.
For sure. And yeah, the proximity to this line that was ever shifting. I mean, it was very tense at the time. People...
There were altercations that led to deaths.
Oh, yeah. Soldiers would get shot. They'd throw grenades at each other. I mean, it was an active war zone.
Do you know the tree cutting story? I keep thinking that should be an omnibus.
What is the tree cutting story? Do you want to save it for...
Yeah, maybe it'll be its own show. But it's like one of these weird DMZ stories of the existence of one elm tree or something leads to a bunch of hacked up bodies.
Well, in this case, the 4 soldiers all defected
separately,
in separate instances. One of them actually like James Dresnak actually became the voice that was broadcast on big loudspeakers back to this DMZ, where he was like, "Hey man, things are great over here.
I'm
like,
loving it.
You guys got to get your heads right and get across the border."
I wonder what the odds are that they were actually being, treated well as special little flowers, or if they were just being tortured into, hey, you better do that or we'll put you back in the machine.
Well, in 2006, the BBC did a documentary called Crossing the Line, where they found Dresnak and...
Are any of them back in the West or all still in North Korea? Or?
Well, a couple of them died prior to any opportunity to make it back, died of, at pretty young ages, 40s and 50s in North Korea, sort of heart disease style deaths.
Probably there. It's probably the normal lifespan there, sadly.
Yeah, right. But I'll get to the other two in a second. But the four of them kind of lived more or less together. They each married, although, like Dresnak married a woman whose nationality was never confirmed, and even in the documentary, he wouldn't say where she was from. Suspicion is that she was Romanian.
Yeah, maybe you don't want to dilute your Juche genes with.
Well,
these
no.
white guys.
In
right?
fact, all of their wives. Oh, I see what you're saying. Like none of them
if there's
took
a Caucasian
Korean wives.
handy, right? Exactly.
Right.
It's probably against the. It's against the thrust of their propaganda, right?
But the reason that the wives were never really sort of pushed to the fore is that the suspicion was they were all kidnapped.
Ooh.
The North Koreans had a habit, and a lot of this sort of Kim Jong-il's desire to be seen in the West as a creative, like, cool kid. He's obviously, his dad isn't dying anytime soon. And his solution was to go sort of kidnap people, like lure them onto a boat or...
Yeah, from Japan in a lot of cases, I think. I read a novel that kind of fictionalized some
Charles Jenkins's wife was Japanese. Anyway, so they lived together with their wives. They had children, but it was unclear what their purpose was. They were used as propaganda. All four of them weirdly sort of looked like blonde Mormons. They all were very handsome, fit, and they were often posed together, sitting around a picnic basket, just loving the North with their beautiful wives.
So good up there.
But they had nothing to do, and there was a lot of, because it was a completely homogenous country, a lot of racism, because America by this point in time had been absolutely villainized as the enemy of the Korean state. So an image of a white guy, a big, tall white guy, was just drilled into young Koreans or young North Koreans as like the embodiment of evil.
Yeah.
And then there were these four U.S. servicemen that were like, hey.
Except for these guys.
Hey, what's up? How's it going?
They proved the superiority of our system.
They did. And they lived there until the mid-'70s, kind of purposeless. Eventually, they kind of didn't get along very well. They didn't like each other. Dresnak and...
It's like a reality show.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Jenkins and Dresnak just hated one another's guts. But in the 70s, Kim Jong-il was really promoting these epic films, and he was tired of North Korean films being melodramatic, focusing on Juche exclusively, wooden performances. He's
got some creative juices.
He does. And he wanted like to start making real shows. He wanted shows. And so in 1978, they started production on a 20-part miniseries.
Ooh, ambitious.
20 hours long, a film called Unsung Heroes. And
Is it an epic of North Korean history?
It's an epic of North Korean sort of revolutionary resistance to the imperialist West. And in this film, all 4 American servicemen, Larry Abisher, James Dresnick, Jerry Parrish, and Charles Jenkins, were all cast in various roles, because this was the problem with making big dramatic North Korean films, that you couldn't disguise a North Korean actor as like a gringo bad guy.
Did these guys have to play multiple parts, or they just put on a series of wigs and mustaches to play different characters?
Ultimately, they each became a major role in the film. Dresnick became like the evil army guy. Jenkins he wore a bald wig and was kind of the capitalist, like the evil behind the throne. One of them, I think Abisher played like an Irish soldier who was so dissatisfied with his treatment by the British Army that he became a communist sympathizer. This was kind of playing on the IRA being part of the global
revolutionary movement.
Yeah.
But I guess you can never have battle scenes with a bunch of Western troops.
No, although in the film, they because they had unlimited resources relative to they had massive set pieces, and it was a huge hit in North Korea. It was,
especially if everyone has to go.
Everyone has to go, but also they had these real bad guys. It became it was on television. Mm-hmm. It became a big part of Korean culture, or North Korean culture, so much that these 4 Americans finally were not just like rehabilitated, but like accepted within North Korean society as kind of stars, minor stars, recognized on the street. They were often called by the first names of the characters they played.
They're celebrities now.
Celebrities.
This is their roots or Winds of War or something.
Yeah, that's right. And later on, so Dresnick stayed in North Korea happily throughout his life. His Romanian wife died, and he married actually a woman from Togo, who was there.
There can't be that many Togolese women in the dating apps in Pyongyang.
There weren't, but she was, I think, the wife of a diplomat, and maybe he left her there, or maybe she was kidnapped. And they were happily married then for the rest of his life. Jenkins was married to a Japanese woman who had been kidnapped, and you may remember this. His wife really wanted to be reunited with her family, and eventually in the 90s was allowed to go meet her family, and once there, defected. And then Jenkins was really bawling about missing his wife, and for, I think, several years couldn't, they wouldn't let him reunite. And eventually they did say, all right, you can go meet your wife. And then he immediately defected.
There's some problems with North Korean security.
Yeah,
their kidnapping is a solid B+, but I don't know if their retention is that good.
Well, we'll see. That continues to be part of the story. And then Jenkins was arrested by the U.S. Army for desertion, and
he must have known.
But it was at a time, I think George W. Bush was president, and it was at a time when they were trying to, not create a ton of diplomatic problems with North Korea, because we were busy fighting wars everywhere else. And so they sentenced him to 30 days in jail. But a big part of it was that he did a massive publicity campaign about how awful it was in North Korea.
This guy will say whatever you want, basically.
He will. And he wrote a book, and he was a huge hero in Japan, partly because of his Japanese wife and his devotion to her. And he lived out his life in Japan as sort of a celebrity, having escaped the North Koreans.
He never got another miniseries role, but he had real life drama. That's good.
In the BBC documentary, he claimed in his post-North Korean propaganda run that Dresnick had been beating him, had been a North Korean stooge and was an evil guy. But then Dresnick in in the documentary was like, this guy's a liar, and he's been a liar the whole time. It's kind of an astonishing documentary because he seems very much at his leisure and very much free to speak his mind. He does
Even
not
though he's
seem
still in North Korea.
Yeah, he doesn't seem brainwashed at all. And his story is, yeah, it's a dictatorship, and we're like, it's poor here, and we're monitored, but I'm free to go where I want and do what I want. And it shows him walking around it's sort of in contravention of what we think of as the story.
Yeah, I mean,
there.
from what I know, even visitors there are very carefully minded, both, explicitly and through surveillance. But I mean, maybe this was a case where they believed in this guy, they knew him well, and they're like, he'll say the right thing on camera. He's a believer.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, he seemed very much like, hey, this is a great place to live. I mean, not a ton of other Americans have joined him over the years. Some have. There have been soldiers that crossed the line. Not a ton.
Think he's frustrated that his tourism campaign is not working? Guys, it's great. Nobody believes me.
Well, so the success of Unsung Heroes inspired Kim Jong-il to say, listen, it's now time for North Korean cinema to get serious. But he didn't feel like anybody in North Korea had the creative juice or the independence from Juche to really make the films that he wanted to make.
I love that he's a misunderstood genius.
And so I think right around that time, North Korean operatives actually tried to kidnap a South Korean movie star by the name of Yoon Jung-hee and her husband Paik Kun-woo, who was a classical musician. And that kidnapping went awry. They weren't successful. But in 1978, they lured one of the great stars of South Korean cinema, a woman by the name of Choi Yoon-hee, who had been like not exactly the Marilyn Monroe of 50s and 60s South Korean film, but she was one of the golden age stars. And
she's a household name in South Korea.
And part of her stardom was that she seemed, both in appearance and in the roles that she played, to be the archetypal Korean woman, the archetypal Korean beauty. But her career had sort of hit the rocks. She was, she was now middle-aged, and film in South Korea was being heavily censored under the dictatorship of Park Chung-hee.
There'd been a golden age, and now no more.
In the 70s, there was a real crackdown. And so her career had faltered, but there was another wrinkle, which was that she'd been married to one of the most famous South Korean directors and producers, and he was the person that started the first real South Korean film studio, a man by the name of Shin Sung-ok.
Okay. They're not married anymore? Or?
Well, so they made several films. They made a dozen films together. She, over the course of her career, had starred in over 130 films. He directed more than 70 films in South Korea. And they'd been happily married through this golden age of Korean cinema and were kind of a star couple, Ben Affleck and and J-Lo.
Sure.
What were they called together?
Benifer,
thank you.
There's lots of director and their muse combos in world cinema. So this was Korea's version of that.
But he, Shin Sung-ok, had an affair with a young actress that had produced 2 children. He and Choi Yoon-hee were not able to have children, although they had adopted 2. But after his affair, she divorced him, and both of their careers sort of fell apart. The lack of because Korea is a conservative country. Actually, when they'd gotten married, it was scandalous because she was already married. I mean, they had been sort of dogged by scandal. But by the late 70s, they were scrambling both financially and creatively to make anything decent. And so in 78, Choi Eun-hee was contacted by like some financiers in Hong Kong and invited to come to Hong Kong to talk about a big film project that they were excited for her to, that was going to revitalize her career. But once she arrived in Hong Kong, she was ushered quickly onto a yacht, and then the yacht sailed through the night, and when she woke up, I guess they sedated her. When she woke up, she was in North Korea and being welcomed by Kim Jong-il as though she had come as a visiting star. Like big welcoming.
He's there personally. This person she's seen in, TV footage.
Just like, hello. And, kind of, you can imagine how overwhelming that would be. Just fully kidnapped and then kept in relative luxury, but basically kept as a house cat. Now, strangely, Shin Son-ok, although divorced from her, still monitored her. They were still friends. And he was conscious of her going to Hong Kong for this exciting opportunity. And when she didn't return, very suspicious.
He was the one who noticed that she had vanished?
Yeah, and he pursued her to Hong Kong. Now, this is part of the story that feels like it might be a little revisionist, but he, according to their story, the two of them, he went to Hong Kong to find her. And while in Hong Kong, was also kidnapped by the North Koreans and taken again in the dead of night to North Korea. Not reunited with Choi Eun-hee, but instead he tried a couple of times to escape, at one point getting as far as like riding a freight train over the bridge into China, but getting caught because he fell asleep on the top of a coal car.
What?
And after his second escape attempt, he was thrown into a North Korean jail and tortured and re-educated for a period of 5 years.
Oh, man. So at first they're like, this guy's going to be cool. You're in North Korea. We're going to take care of you. We'll make big, great movies. And they were surprised when he kept bailing. And now they're like, this guy needs juche.
Yeah, he needs a little bit of juche.
But he and Chae-yoon, they never like reunited. It wasn't like, and now it's your ex-husband is going to be living with you.
Well, not for the 5 years that he was in prison. And Shin Son-ok he was the first person to suggest that they make a movie of the book Rambo. He was like already trying to get to the United States because he admired Hollywood so much. He was like,
oh, First Blood had not been made yet.
First Blood had not been made.
I see.
When First Blood was made, it actually was one of the favorite movies of Kim Jong-il. Loved First Blood.
I mean, that movie is very different from the other Rambo movies. That movie is not, people might not know, that's not a gung-ho Rambo movie.
He's on the outside.
You can see an anti-American dictator enjoying First Blood.
Yeah, right.
I do, and I'm not an anti-American dictator.
No.
Yet.
You're definitely a little bit of an autocrat.
If I could find the territory,
I'm
a man without a country.
But so they were not. They didn't know the other one was in North Korea until 1983, when at that point Shin Son-ok had been released from the Gulag, and Kim Jong-il had a big party, a birthday party, where he invited them both as guests, and he's like, "Oh, let me introduce you."
Did he not know they had been married?
No, of course he did.
Oh, okay.
And so he did this big scripted, like, "Let me introduce you to one another," and they're like, "Oh my God," they'd both been there since. I mean, they were both kidnapped by North Korea within months of each other in 1978.
Is this not an international incident? Embassies are not involved?
Well, so the problem was that the South Korean military dictatorship did not want anyone to know
that you could just kidnap a celebrity, a South Korean celebrity.
Yeah, that these two had been kidnapped. The American government didn't want, they never referenced those 4 American soldiers after the initial burst of like, whoa, did these guys defect? Like, even after they became huge film stars in North Korea, the U.S. Army or the U.S. government wanted nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And so, no, it was all happening behind a shroud, and it benefited no one in the West to shine a light on this.
True.
They weren't big enough. They weren't like diplomats. They were sort of faded movie people.
Because, maybe it makes North Korea look bad, but North Korea already looks bad.
Right.
And if they're quasi-defector status, it's kind of it's a minefield if you expose them.
Well, after they were reunited, Kim Jong-il really encouraged them to get remarried, which they did.
Probably, I bet he married them. I bet he performed this.
I wonder. There aren't a ton of photographs of their marriage, but then he suddenly was treating Shin Sang-ok like a true celebrity and creative genius, and said, "I want the 2 of you to make films for North Korea, and I will give you all the resources." He's still not the head of the government. His father is in power for another decade, but he's a prominent. This is his high-heeled boot, sunglasses, like perm era.
And it's not a terrible offer for this declining director and actor either.
No.
Unlimited resources. It's a terrible place to live, but we'll be treated well.
And it is Korea, right? The language, the culture is all the same, mostly.
It would be like us being kidnapped to Alberta and forced to do game shows in indie rock, respectively.
I think
we'd be okay.
I think we'd be okay. It's a much smaller market, and the government would actually subsidize our income. Maybe,
like they do for all Canadians.
Yeah.
Well,
I think Canadian indie rock actually does get somewhat.
They get some CanCon grants and stuff.
I mean, there's a lot of largesse in the sense that Canadian radio is incentivized to play a certain number of Canadian bands.
A certain number, yeah.
Kind of like North Korea. I think of Canada as, the North Korea of our South Korea.
It's a very long DMZ.
We make a lot more cars than they do.
It looks like in this case the invasion will come from the south, not from the north.
Well, that's what the North Koreans thought about South Korea.
I guess.
Anyway, so Kim Jong-il sits him down and says, "Listen, I want you to watch movies with me, and we're going to hang out. We're going to watch a lot of movies, and we're going to make movies here in North Korea." So
I can't believe nobody has made this movie yet with Steven Yeun. It's good. It's a good setup.
It's a pretty good movie. This movie making
this real thing.
The 2, the husband and wife team now actually kind of smuggle a tape recorder into some of these conversations, trying to prove, I think, or trying to get evidence for the fact that they didn't defect, because South Korea, to the degree that they acknowledged that these 2 were gone, characterized it as they had gone to the North voluntarily. They did not want they didn't want this kidnapping story.
They'd rather have 2 disloyal citizens than a intelligence failure.
So, in fact, when those taped conversations actually came to light, this is, again, hard for us to fathom in a kind of pre-internet world, but they were some of the first instances where Kim Jong-il's voice had ever been recorded. The West had never heard him speak.
Kim Il-sung, probably you get speeches on parade days, but the air behind the throne, nothing.
Right, nothing. Well, anyway, together in North Korea, they made, I think she acted in films that he didn't direct. He directed films she wasn't in, but the 2 of them together made 17 films throughout the 80s. In 84, they made a movie called An Emissary of No Return that actually got screened they filmed it in Czechoslovakia, and it was for a lot of North Koreans, the first time that they'd seen white Europeans acting, that weren't American enemies.
There were Eastern European characters in the movie.
Right.
I got it.
They made a film in 85 called Salt, and she actually won the Best Actress Award at the Moscow International Film Festival.
These are kidnap victims, and they're now leading celebrities in the Soviet bloc film world.
That's right. That's right. And the movies are, by all accounts, pretty darn good movies.
Huh.
He was, an incredibly seasoned director. She was this 130 film megastar.
She's got star quality. They got a lot of money.
And according to them, in subsequent interviews, they were given not only a lot of creative freedom by Kim Jong-il, but also they had a relationship with him where he allowed them to speak candidly to him. And in some accounts, they were the only people that could really talk to him in a way that if somebody in North Korea spoke that way to him, they'd be thrown down a hole.
You have to think at this point they are no longer taking every escape opportunity.
Right.
If they're traveling widely, this is their life now.
This is their life. And then the culminating film of their time in North Korea was right after the resurgence of Godzilla movies in Japan, the kind of mid-'80s, not exactly ironic, but, the reboot of Godzilla that happened in the mid-'80s.
I remember.
They made a ersatz Godzilla movie.
Like a North Korean Godzilla movie?
A North Korean Godzilla movie. The story was that
American military testing leads to...
No, it was actually a kind of allegory of capitalism. A North Korean...
A lot of American monster movies, by the way, are also allegories of capitalism.
Yeah, that's right.
This works.
The plot of the movie was that a farmer inventor had built a little model monster, and his daughter, maybe his orphaned daughter, cut herself on it or spilled a drop of blood on it, and it animated the monster, and the monster grew into a big Godzilla.
Oh, it's like a golem.
Yeah, and what it did was it ate metal, and so initially it was a great friend to the proletariat because it ate all the guns,
all the invaders,
guns. But then it became insatiable and became a destructive force as it ate all the metal.
As capitalism always does.
That's exactly right.
I see.
Ate all the farmers' tools, created a world in which the proletariat now could no longer provide for themselves. And she, in an act of self-sacrifice, allowed herself to be eaten by the monster, at which point it exploded.
This is a twist on the King Kong movie.
Yeah, that's right.
Fay Ray lets the monster do what it wants.
That's right. Eat her up.
I think a Korean audience would have known what Pulgasari is. It's kind of a cryptid of Korean legend, right?
Yeah, it's an ancient Korean.
You'll see it in parchments.
Pulgasari, and this movie was called Pulgasari.
It's the same. It's just different romanizations.
Yeah. Pulgasari.
It sounds more like a B in the middle of a word, but it sounds more like a P at the start of a word. But they still romanize it as a B. That's why Busan became Busan, but it's spelled the same, or it's pronounced the same.
Yeah, it was a mythological creature, and the movie has very much the kind of crap.
They can't have good effects labs, even if they have a lot of money for costumes. And stuff.
For sure, like stop motion clay Godzilla. Yeah. But because they had this enormous budget by North Korean standards, like there are scenes that have 10,000 extras. It's an epic film. It is available on YouTube. It does have its cult followers, and it has its
is it like a schlock movie here? Like you'll never, because it's not just like it's a crazy badly made monster movie, but you'll never believe the story behind it. It's North Korean government propaganda.
It's for sure a Scarecrow video style, like young film nerds who dress all in black are like, oh, my favorite film
Tarantino
is
loves Pulgasari.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, you can get it at
Scarecrow?
At Scarecrow, yeah.
See, there it is. That's why we fund Scarecrow.
There's a DVD, there's a burned DVD that's probably not a legitimate release, and an old VHS that probably is, because it's such a rarity. You have to rent it in store, which means they'll probably put like a $90 hold on your credit card before they let you. They've got a lot of kind of one-of-a-kind items where you can rent them, but it's like a hotel. They're going to make sure there's a $100 hold on your Visa first.
Well, so Pulgasari was slated to be released as the biggest North Korean film of all time.
This could have shifted the Cold War.
This was it. It was going to go, and they were working on distribution deals. This film was going to put the North Korean film industry on the map. And in 1986, Choi Eun-hee and Shin Sang-ok went on a European publicity tour, partly looking for funding and support for future films. And
Pulgasari 2? Pulgasari versus Mothra?
Electric Boogaloo. They were in Vienna, and again, no credit to the North Korean security services, but they arranged a meeting with a Japanese journalist. They all piled into a taxi cab on their way to some event.
Did they just get out the other side of the cab like in a movie?
Essentially, they were like, go to the American embassy. And so...
so they still were looking for an out, apparently.
Eventually, they had the tapes of their conversations, and they drove up to the front door of the American embassy, and they ran inside and said, we didn't want to be communists this whole time. We want to be free. It was obviously a scandal.
I guess if North Korea is so isolated, their tradecraft's not going to be very good. They never have a chance to try any of this stuff in a major European capital.
Well, what's funny is the children, the sort of Anglo children
of the
defectors all went to foreign language schools in North Korea. Some of them are like blonde or dark, cool looking Europeans who are now, their faces are well known because they were paraded around so much, but they were raised to speak European languages, I think with the idea that they would one day be spies. But of course, the North Korean, again, their tradecraft's not that good, so putting their faces out like, hey, look at this propaganda success. Anyway, so the two of them did get accepted. They were given asylum in the United States.
What year is this?
This is 1986.
Huh.
They were squired away to Virginia, where they lived in,
Mount Vernon.
Well, they were lived in protective custody. They were eventually given American citizenship in
Interesting.
In 3 years later.
Why not South Korean? Do you think they just didn't want to go home?
Yeah, maybe the South Korean government
battled figures still.
There was a lot of suspicion in South Korea that they had actually crossed over to North Korea voluntarily, and that this was all some kind of retro.
Well, plus all the
ruse.
movies they had made there, and then at some point they decided to defect back.
Right. They put a lot of Juche in those films, even if they weren't Juche films. Although Pulgasari was kind of vetted by South Korea, and it was determined that there was no amount of criminal Juche in it.
Juche free?
It was just.
Do you think it could screen in Korea?
Well, so eventually the film did get a wider release. Kim Jong-il, Kim Jong-il prohibited its release because it had not yet fully had its debut before they defected. And so a lot of different stories coming out because it's hard to get the real story. But he then banned all of the movies they made in the 80s. He whatever his international distribution deals, he canceled it all. But after his son took power,
also a pop culture nerd, right?
Pop culture nerd, he loosened up the reins, and those movies kind of disseminated into the West. Pulgasari had a big debut in Japan, and it was a huge hit in Japan.
Wow.
And I think maybe still
as a novelty, I assume.
Yeah, well known. Although if it were well known in Japan, you would think Scarecrow would have more than one VHS copy of it. So, it's not. It is on YouTube, but it's not like you can't just
It never had
order
a
of-
U.S. distributor.
Yeah, exactly. And then he really wanted to become a Hollywood director. So he tried his hand in Hollywood. He actually directed the second of 4 Three Ninjas movies.
Oh, I remember those.
The first Three Ninjas movie was actually distributed by Disney. The subsequent 3 were distributed by TriStar and didn't make...
Maybe straight to Blockbuster?
Yeah, he didn't make a ton of money. But what's fascinating is the two of them stayed married.
Huh.
They weren't... I mean, their forced remarriage, or, somewhat forced remarriage, lasted.
Say what you will about Kim Jong-il, great matchmaker.
Yeah. The two of them ended up going back to South Korea in 1999 after, 15 years living in America or close. And Shin died in 2006 at the age of 79, but Choi lived to 2018. She was 91 years old. And
I want to look at her credits. I want to see if she still kept acting. Did she go back to South Korea? And because, by that time their industry is really taking off.
she was in Rambo 3.
Apparently not much.
No, she wasn't in Rambo 3.
No.
That'd be good, though. That would have been a cool casting.
It's confusing. Isn't Rambo 3 in Afghanistan? Yeah,
Yes.
It looks like she did not start acting again after her return to the West. Well, but she had
She
a
would have been in her 70s, and
very interesting life, though.
she did. She did. And I, although I have not seen Pulgasari, I have seen the documentary Crossing the Line, and I recommend both films to the Omnibus listeners who have made a point to listen to every band we mention and every film we mention.
Do they have to watch the straight-to-video sequels to Three Ninjas?
Just the second one.
Okay. And that concludes Pulgasari, entry 1007.IS4602, certificate number 37139 in the Omnibus. Speaking of dastardly propaganda machinery, we're on social media as at the Omnibus Project, at Ken Jennings, at John Roderick. We just don't like it.
Nope, don't like it one bit.
You can email us at theomnibusproject@gmail.com
Yes,
with
please
your
do.
own thoughts on North Korean monster movies. It looks like in the West it's sometimes released as The Monster Mightier Than Godzilla,
Oh,
which is kind of mean. Like they're taking Godzilla's IP rights just to diss him in their own subtitle. I feel like if I were Toho Studios or whatever, I wouldn't stand for that. You can mail us things to P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington 98155.
what do you got there? You got
for
some
example-
mail, eh?
What do we have here? I have a letter from Sharon in Grand Forks. Increasingly unclear if this is a bit or if she is going to assassinate me.
How often does Sharon from Grand Forks write you?
Every time we mention North Dakota on the show.
I see.
Apparently, at this point, one of us said, "We do still hate everything about North Dakota." And Sharon says, it's me. "I could have never imagined these words spoken by you, Ken." Sharon, you don't have to imagine. We talk about our disregard for North Dakota pretty much. It's the main reason we started the podcast.
No, I'm the one that fights for North Dakota.
You've actually been.
I have been to North Dakota many times.
You've seen all the highlights. All 0 of the highlights.
Well, what's funny is I've never been to Grand... No, wait. Have I been to Grand Forks? I have, because I've driven straight south from Winnipeg.
I can give you Sharon's address.
But
if you want to hang
Grand
out.
Forks is right on the Minnesota border. It's kind of like Fargo, except north. And so, I don't know. You kind of want to wonder how much of it is just Minnesota culture.
I can't tell if this is serious. It's delightful either way. You have become so enamored of bright, shiny objects you see in your travels, you fail to appreciate Middle America.
Oh,
The strength of our nation depends on how well these states are doing.
yes.
This is a great letter either way. I don't know if I prefer it as a bit or not.
There's actually East Grand Forks, which is across the river from Grand Forks, that's in Minnesota. So
East Grand Forks is in Minnesota.
East Grand Forks is in Minnesota. So what Grand
It's like
Forks
the
is
East
she
St. Louis
talking
of-
about?
She's apparently from the real one because she's not sticking up for Minnesota in these letters. But I feel like the last time we mentioned North Dakota was because we got a note from a North Dakotan saying, "Nope, you're right. It's not great." And so we had a good time about that. And Apparently, Sharon was infuriated. He's a defector, this guy. This guy should move to East Grand Forks, apparently, for talking crap about North Dakota.
Now, this is something I didn't know. Are you ready for this?
I am.
The border between Minnesota and North Dakota is the Red River.
Yes.
And the Red River flows essentially north-south, but it is one of those twisty-ass rivers. Like the actual border of North Dakota and Minnesota, although it looks like a straight line, is the biggest squiggle that I think it's got to be the squiggliest U.S. border that there is. And the Red River goes right through the heart of Fargo. Of course, the other side is Moorhead, the Minnesota side. Fargo-Moorhead is what they call it.
Is Moorhead like on the Minnesota side of the border? I see.
And it's smaller than the Fargo side. Look at that border. I'm so blown away.
It's like a fractal. The more you zoom in, the more it squiggles.
If there is a more squiggly border than the border between Minnesota and North Dakota, I want somebody to write me and tell me, because I don't think there is.
We also got a note from Becca, who started listening to Omnibus in 2020. The pandemic forced a lot of people into sus decisions like this one.
It did, although if you recall, the pandemic actually kind of reduced podcast listening across the board. Every podcast
nobody was
suffered.
commuting.
Yeah, all the drivers stopped listening.
Thank you, Amazon, for bringing back, for getting rid of work from home. Thank you for doing your part. Rebecca sent us her own work, a disaster prep guide for non-preppers, and thought we would enjoy it given the theme of the show.
I enjoy it already.
Stupid jokes and practical tasks for preparing for catastrophe. It's called My Ready for Anything I Will Survive or Even Thrive Manual.
Oh, I'm going to give this to my ladies.
It's even got workbook exercises, list of things to do, and then there's a disaster playbook, which is more instructional.
We only get one disaster playbook, though.
And then an important papers pack, a folder we can put our important papers in when we have a go bag ready to go.
That's really nice. Look at that stuff.
I know, it's really well designed. It looks like Juche propaganda.
It does. It does.
It's
Although
beautiful.
foxy American Rosie the Riveter type.
I mean, she could be I don't know.
Someone that was captive.
She could be a bosomy North Korean that they just colored her hair purple for some reason. I guess she's wearing an earring. Maybe that's against Juche principles. Becca, thank you so much. We will enjoy these here. Take a look.
Those are very cool, Becca.
If you're gonna Google them, her outfit is called "Here Comes the Apocalypse." That's fun. Look for the Futurelings online if you want to complain or commiserate about this show or any others. If you're from North Dakota, maybe you should start your own omnibus group.
There's a coloring book here.
Oh,
cool.
She also sent us a Here Comes the Apocalypse pen, which is better than that crappy Whistler one. It looks like a Sharpie, but it's just
I
a ballpoint.
love the art here. My God, these are beautifully made.
Yeah, these are the real deal.
Yeah. It's like prepper stuff, but for non-preppers, right? Is that what she said? Or no, it's...
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, okay. All right.
But it seems to be like not so tongue-in-cheek despite the nice graphic design.
No, the work that's gone into this is sincere.
But it seems like it's actually instructional for
Yeah.
what you might want to know.
Well, and there's information in here, not just in case like an army of Tesla trucks comes rolling into your town, but hurricanes, snowstorms, tsunamis, wildfire. It covers all the bases. I like it.
And if you are not from North Dakota and therefore still would like to support the omnibus, if we haven't angered you, if you're from North Dakota, just remember John, one of the co-hosts, is full of love for the Peace Garden State.
Love. Squiggliest border in the U.S.
Not me. I hate peace. I hate gardens.
You hate states.
I hate, what else do they have up there? Theodore Roosevelt National Park. Is that in North Dakota?
They have the world's largest tire dump.
Oh, I'm kind of coming around on North Dakota.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's the world's largest, but it's the biggest one I've ever seen.
Well, now I lost interest.
Well, hang on.
You had me when you were lying about it.
The world's largest tire dump. What happens if I put that into the old typewriter?
But maybe
it's in Kuwait. 40 million tires.
I can't believe North Dakota sold it to Kuwait. That's so crazy. If you share my disregard for the state of North Dakota and would like to support a podcast that's full of anti-North Dakota feeling, because I've been distracted by the bright, shiny objects of the world, not the beauties of the heartland, the way you can support that ethos is to go to patreon.com/omnibusproject and read up on all that you're missing out by being a freeloading Thursday listener. There's early access to every show. There's 60 odd addenda shows now, plus a whole bunch of like t-shirts and photos and other perks. All for your perusal at patreon.com/omnibusproject.
Apparently, America's largest tire dump used to be called Tire Mountain near Hudson, Colorado.
Let's go climb Tire Mountain.
It once had 80 million tires, but they've been cleaning it up.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of tires. 80 million tires, even divided by 4.
Are you following the discourse about how tires are really bad? Like,
they're bad.
Tires are what's like, it's just the rubber from tires that's, I think now that we're moving away from internal combustion engines to different greener alternatives, we realize that we have not solved the tire problem. All the vulcanized rubber and chemicals we're getting into the watershed via our tires.
Well, and for a long time, we were chopping them up and making road out of them.
Ooh,
right?
Is that good or bad?
Well, it was a way to recycle tires. I'm not sure how it is about leaching toxic chemicals into the water.
I mean, when playgrounds, when I was a kid, were full of old tires.
Yeah,
They
right.
filled tires with cement for the tetherball. You got to crawl through tires. It was like they were trying to build whole playgrounds just out of tire technology.
Yeah, they would hang a tire from a chain, and you'd swing around.
Yeah, you'd have to slide down a slide holding a tire.
You'd have to slide down a slide of tires.
Maybe that was just my soccer coach making us do that.
Futurelings, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived, our tire-based civilization survived. We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come. But if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, may have been our final word. If Providence allows, we wish you many goods and cheese and hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.